In the name of the immortal, victorious, heart flame of love, wisdom, and power, ablaze now, coming forth from the very heart of our own beloved mighty I Am presence. We call to beloved Alpha and Omega in the heart of the great central sun for the reinforcement of the white stone, the Cubit Stone of our own immortal Christ identity, the blueprint of God individualized, which is the truth of being for each and every child of God and son and daughter of God, an embodiment across the face of the earth. We ask beloved Archangel Gabriel, beloved mighty Cyclopeia, and the entire spirit of the Great White Brotherhood for the reinforcement in time and space, in our outer consciousness, of that Christ awareness, which is the native consciousness of our own beloved Holy Christ Self, and likewise of the magnificent, limitless Sun of limitless light, which is the native consciousness of our own beloved electronic body. We call to you, beloved El Moria, beloved Saint Germain, beloved Lord Maitreya, to send forth now the call of the Manus of the root races, reinforced by the Holy Christ cells of the mankind of earth, summoning higher and higher the attention, the attunement, and the striving of embodied mankind, that all might look up, fix their gaze riveted upon the source, the blessed focal point of identity in the mighty I Am presence, and live within the expanded consciousness of that God presence all the days of their lives. We thank you, and to this end we deliver our fiat. The Ascended Masters are very aware of your hearts. They share with you the trials and the tribulations of your lives. They are on the razor's edge of attunement and intimacy, quite cognizant of the challenges that all of you face from day to day. They are aware many times of the anguish of hearts that you experience as you strive to move through life, upholding the standard that you have come to know is the standard of perfection, the divine ideals which they, the Ascended Masters, espouse, and having to contrast that with the state of becoming where your world and your experiences are at present. They are aware that, in a sense, it requires sanity, a profound sanity, to practice this path in its fullness. For you are called upon to have faith in things not seen. You are called upon to hold to the highest connection at spiritual levels, transcending even many times the ability of the spiritual eye to see or the ear to hear. You must hold to this discipline throughout all the days of your life, all the while moving through the practical demands that life places upon you. Believe it or not, these demands are actually a great blessing because they are compelling you to rise to levels of mastery over yourself, which would not be possible if you were to, let us say, follow a monastic path, secreting yourself away from the world in a little room somewhere with a loaf of bread and a pitcher of pure water, nothing but the horizon of far-off mountain ranges to keep you company. Although there might be momentary peace, solace in that, and a surcease from the strains of life in the lowlands, it would not be, except in those very rare instances where the individual has already mastered all of the rest of the lessons of life, it would not be progress or opportunity. So, for all of us, we have the challenge of holding connection with the highest levels of Ascended Master Light and filling the days and hours of our lives with some type of activity, not only gainful occupation, but recreation and communion and fellowship with loved ones. All of these things must go on. If the Golden Age were already here in full force, it would be, I grant you, much more easy to follow this path, because every billboard that you passed by would only proclaim perfect images. Every article which you would read in a periodical would likewise speak of perfection. The music, the clothing, the conduct of your fellow human beings with whom you associate, all would rise to this level. All would be massaging your own consciousness and elevating you due to the being enwrapped on all sides by an Ascended Master culture. I do not need to tell you that this is not at present the case anywhere in the outer world, anywhere across the face of the earth, whether it be civilized countries, so-called, or the desert places and the desolate places of the earth. Nowhere will you find in the outer expression as it is produced by the world, nowhere will you find smiling back at you the face of God in the form of Ascended Master culture, Ascended Master consciousness, ascended beings and angelic hosts stepping through the veil, moment by moment, to testify to the truth of the law. For those who have capitulated to the world, they do not necessarily experience the somewhat exquisite crucifixion and pain of knowing the purity of God consciousness and yet having to look upon the impure actions of the outer world. For them, they have the blessed dullness of senses, where the senses have been, in fact, sated and blanked out almost, to where there is no keenness of awareness. For you who are on this path and who do from time to time find yourselves lifted into the exquisite perfection and purity of the God consciousness, then to have to come back and experience the coarseness of the outer world and its ways, sometimes bordering on the horrific, it almost creates a schizophrenic type of existence where it seems virtually impossible for two diametrically opposed truths to be coexisting side by side in your experience. This is not a new phenomenon native to the 20th or the 21st century. It has always been thus for the sons of solitude and the daughters of solitude, back on the days of Atlantis and even back further to Lemuria. It has always been, since the fall, that those who would walk the pathway to the ascension, those who would commune with the elder ascended brothers and sisters of light, have had to spend intervals of sometimes lifetimes bridging these opposing worlds, one from the other. The telltale signs of this experience in the life of many of the initiates who are now ascended are there to read as plain as the billboards on our highways. Nowhere is it more clear than in the case of our own beloved Jesus, who, in his final crowning embodiment, when there were those who said they wanted to come and follow him, ruefully observed that the foxes may have their holes in the ground, the birds may have their nests in the air, but the Son of Man hath not a place to lay his head, hath not a real fortress and a home of light that is his forever. This sentiment of beloved Jesus harkens back to his own novitiate on the path. Earlier embodiments when he was overcoming, even as we are called upon to overcome in this age. So let me share with you one of those great decrees which erupted from his heart as an unspeakable hunger for the living presence, for the courts of heaven, for the ascended master octaves, as the memory of those inner experiences was made alive to his consciousness. He looked all about, could not see it in the outer world, and gave this marvelous cry unto the God of very gods. How amiable are thy tabernacles, O Lord of hosts! My soul longeth, yea, even fainteth, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. The sparrow hath found a house, the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young. Even thine altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Blessed are they who dwell in thy house. They will be still praising thee. Blessed is the man whose strength is in thee, in whose heart are the ways of them, who passing through the valley of Baca maketh it a well, the rain also to fill the pools. They go from strength to strength, every one of them in Zion, appearing before God. Lord God of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob. Behold, O God, our shield. Look upon the face of thine anointed. For a day in thy courts is better than 1,000. And I had rather be a doorkeeper within the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. For the Lord God is a sun and a shield. He will give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly. O Lord of hosts, blessed is the man who trusteth in thee. It is not the desire of the ascended masters for any to be comfortless. It is not the desire for all of you forever and a day to be on tender hooks, stretched on a rack of human experience, pulled this way and that by the aspirations of your heart and by the flood of the world's stimuli, which is an almost constant assault on the outer consciousness. There is an element that can and is intended by the Ascended Masters to bring you not only momentary comfort and surcease, but a permanent, fixed point of contact, which will be a sustaining rock, a foundation stone that you can stand upon firmly through all of the experiences that life may send your way. It is a formula of deliverance that has been long established by the Ascended Masters as the means whereby their disciples may lift themselves from this world and find their point of anchorage in the Ascended Master octave, and through the sustaining of their attention and their faith riveted on that point of anchorage, they are able to move from one day to the next, building upon that point of anchorage and culminating in the victory of their ascension. In the meantime, not postponing that, but finding solace and comfort from day to day in recognizing the world, the tangible world of perfection that exists beyond the veil of human senses, that is there in this very moment and is not so very far removed from you. Today marks the beginning of the foreshadowing of our upcoming July class. Your own immortal beloved, your God presence as the capstone, the flaming, dazzling, shining capstone of the dawning golden age. The techniques for entering into the sensitivity of your God presence are going to be one of the primary themes of this conference, because it is that reinforcement of touching the face of God through your own higher vehicles that will give you the sense of God reality about the path while you are here below in this outer world. When you come to understand that although fleshly eyes and ears may not see and hear beyond the veil, it doesn't change the truth that even for your own individuality, in your higher body temple, such as the body temple of your own holy Christ self, and even more so in the temple of your own mighty I Am presence, the body known as the electronic body, right now, there is sight and hearing. There is touch. There is an ongoing practical side, tangible side to experience. And it is open to you here and now. Here and now, not only in the hereafter, not only once you have made your transition or your ascension, but here and now. It is the divine plan for you to begin experiencing what life is being lived in the body of your holy Christ self and your mighty I Am presence. This focus of God identity beyond the veil has been symbolized in ancient times before the occult law was set aside. There had to be symbols used that would be interpreted to the few and would remain merely as a talisman of light for the many. One of the great symbols that represented the individual God identity that was the source of being for every life stream was the symbol of the stone that was sometimes referred to as a cubit stone, a perfect cube, other times as a capstone, or a cornerstone, or a foundation stone, or even the philosopher's stone. All of these references were actually very directed and intended to be a reference back to the foundation of one's individual identity and the basis on which victory and overcoming would be achieved. There is another of the wonderful, wonderful psalms that were composed by beloved Jesus as the shepherd king David that rehearses a little bit of his own challenge in that embodiment. Those of you who know anything about the life of David will recall that everything was not sweetness and roses for him throughout that embodiment. While there were many days of triumph, there were also times of shame. There were times of great anguish as his own children fought amongst themselves and took up arms against him in his office as king. There were a whole host of even frailties within himself that he had to contend with. Through it all, there was this passionate love for the heart of God. There was this devotion to truth, a humility before the living presence that would not elevate his outer ego, regardless of mistakes which he might have made, which he saw even in his own eyes. So we can all, or at least speaking for myself, I draw great strength and inspiration from the example of beloved Jesus, embodied as David, as he overcame time and time again throughout his life, even into his dotage, the vicissitudes of life that came against him. Now observe how he rehearses the formula of his own victory over all of these challenges, as it is described in the 118th Psalm. I called upon the Lord in distress, and the Lord answered me and set me in a large place. This setting in a large place is the raising of his consciousness out of the very compressed consciousness of the four lower bodies, elevating him into his own holy Christ self and the great expansiveness of consciousness, which is inevitably felt when you rise in attunement. The Lord is on my side, I will not fear. What can man do unto me? The Lord taketh my part with those who help me. Therefore shall I behold my desire upon those who despise me. It is better to trust in the Lord than put confidence in man. It is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in princes. All the nations compassed me about. In the name of the Lord will I destroy them. They compassed me about, but in the name of the Lord shall I destroy. They compass me like bees. They are quenched like the fire of thorns. In the name of the Lord will I vanquish them. Thou hast thrust hard at me that I might fall, but the Lord hath helped me. The Lord is my strength, my song, and is become my salvation. The voice of rejoicing and salvation is in the tabernacle of righteousness. The right hand of the Lord doeth valiantly. The right hand of the Lord is exalted, and doeth valiantly. I shall not die, but live, and declare the works of the Lord. He hath chastened me very much, but he hath not given me over to death. Open to me the gates of righteousness, and I shall enter into them and praise the Lord. This gate of the Lord into which the righteous shall enter, I shall praise thee, for thou hast heard me, and art become my salvation. And the stone which the builders rejected is become the head of the corner. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day which the Lord hath made, and we shall rejoice and be glad in it. Save now, I beseech thee. O Lord, I beseech thee, send now prosperity. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord, and blessed out of the house of the Lord. God is the Lord who hath shown us light. Thou art my God, I shall praise thee. O give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, and his mercy endureth forever. We, in our humanity, with the four vehicles of identity that we wear, our four lower bodies, we are, in a sense, comparable to that great pyramid that is in the Giza Plateau. Interesting thing about that great pyramid, it does not have its capstone. It is without that crowning stone at the very apex. And that is typical of the human condition. When individuals do not know or do not draw upon their higher God identity. There are the four sides, just as there are the four lower bodies. But what is missing is that capstone with the all-seeing eye, gazing out, the unblinking eye of the all-seeing eye of God, gazing out in all directions, that has been married to the rest of the pyramid. Now observe this reference by David to this capstone. The stone which the builders rejected is become the head of the corner. In a sense, if you think about it, the only place where there is such a configuration is in that capstone on a pyramid. What is meant by this? What is meant is, what do human beings use as the pattern of identity that they are going to construct for themselves? And furthermore, what is the foundation that they use to erect their house? Is it going to be built on sand? Is it going to be built by the willowy beaches? Or is it going to be built on the rock? The wise man builds his house upon the rock of the God identity. And as that God blueprint, that divine blueprint which exists and is only to be found within the higher self, as that is drawn upon and used as the beginning and the ending of who and what we are, as we look about in this world and try to discover for ourselves an identity, a self, who we are, what will be our career, who shall we marry, who shall we associate with, what kind of activities will we engage in. All of this can either be kind of ad hoc, we just react to various stimuli which are placed before us, or on the other hand, we can go to this white Cubit stone, where is, in fact, etched a blueprint of identity that has been preserved since the individualization of the electronic body of the mighty I Am Presence long, long ago in the beginning. And we can elect to say to ourselves, we will lay this foundation stone. Just like when you're going to build a very noble building, many times there is a ceremony of the laying of the first cornerstone on that building. Masonic Order, sponsored by beloved Saint Germain, is known for having such ceremonies. And if you think about it, once that first stone is set in place, it does define the vertical and the horizontal. It does define how the rest of the whole building will have to conform to the original setting of that stone. So the best thing which the Ascended Masters can wish for each and every one of you is that you make connection consciously with this higher God consciousness that is alive and well, aware of its own being, utilizing vehicles of expression in the form of your Holy Christ Self and in the form of your electronic body, to come to know those personages which are really one and are one in the same with you. And having made that acquaintance and entered into that communion, more and more identifying with it, there will come a time when you have successfully begun to fast the appetites of the world out of your system. Just like you would fast physically to expel physical toxins, so you can expel all kinds of emotions and thoughts that are not characteristic of your own Holy Christ Self. And in the fullness of time, you will begin to find the sensitivity of your Holy Christ Self and your Mighty I Am presence communicated to your outer conscious awareness. And this is when the big change in life takes place. For you are no longer operating on blind faith. You're not operating on what anyone, be they a loved one, a trusted one, or even a messenger, may say to you or testify to you, but you are beginning to operate on the basis of your own experience. As you are able to rise in attunement, to look through the eyes of your Holy Christ Self, to sense the ravishing fragrances of the inner levels, to have the hearing of the music of the spheres, as the world in which your Holy Christ Self lives today becomes tangible and sensible to your consciousness, you will have the ability to bridge the gap into that life and no longer have to live and expend your time and energy dining on the empty calories of the outer world's culture, which is antithetical to the consciousness of your own Holy Christ Self. So the goal of your path, even now, is for you to begin to get reinforcement of this reality and to begin to live in that consciousness of your God presence more and more as the day goes on and as the week goes on. We call this discipline living the Ascended Master way of life. It means that our path is not bifurcated. It is not chopped in two to where there is the spiritual life we have when we come together to decree, to commune with the Ascended Masters, where we come up for air, take a deep gulp of air and pure oxygen, and then go beneath the waves for the next 5 or 7 days, or however long it is between such intervals of communion, when you have to kind of hold your breath and operate beneath the waves in an outer worldly sense. That is no way to live, and it is not how the Ascended Masters would have you live. They would have you understand that there is a way for the life and the experience that is the nature of your own Holy Christ self to be communicated to your spiritual senses even now, so that you will have that reinforcement. This is how the initiates have overcome the world. They have begun to live in that God-perfected world even while their bodies were obliged to operate in this outer, more prosaic world. All of you have hearts, and the heart is going to be your first and greatest foundation of connection with your beloved Holy Christ self. When this contact begins for you, it may not begin in some very supernatural, paranormal way, any miraculous way. It may come as an undefinable peace of spirit, a calmness within you, a conviction that cannot be shaken by anything that might assail your faith. The still small voice of your Holy Christ self will speak within you. And whereas perhaps the outer appearance world would be able to intimidate, to cause a certain ejaculation of fear to go through your world, as you enter into this communion with your Holy Christ self, more and more there will come that conviction that the path is real, the light is real, the Ascended Masters are real, these realms of light and perfection are real. They are not otherworldly. They are not the figment of anyone's imagination. They are God reality. They are going on in a different time, space continuum than the outer four lower bodies experience, but they are going on nonetheless. And that it is your divine prerogative to so commune with your own Holy Christ self that you are able to enter into those worlds consciously through your meditations and your communion, and feel the tangibility of that light all about you. One of the first things that comes, which I know has already been the common experience of all of you, is you begin to sense the majestic presences of the various Ascended Masters. You know the fellowship of their brotherhood and sisterhood that they share together. And you are able many times to actually come to distinguish the vibration of one ascended being from another. You feel that sense of camaraderie that they extend to you. You feel the sense of welcome and acceptance that they extend to you. You feel the solidarity with your cause that they have entered into. They are very much keenly on the lookout for assisting you in every possible way. You should understand then that you are not limited in your choices to what the world is dishing up on its cafeteria line as food for thought, food for hearing, food for entertainment. You're not limited to that any longer. but you can even now, through the vehicles of your Holy Christ self and your God presence, begin to enter into that ascended master life through those vehicles, because your presence is already a firstborn citizen of that ascended master realm. Do you recall the parable of Jesus about the wedding, and of how when the wedding feast had taken place, that there was one who was present who did not have on a garment, a pure white seamless wedding garment, and that individual was uninvited out of that company. Jesus was trying to punctuate the role of the electronic body of the I Am Presence, that in order to enter into this company of ascended beings, you've got to wear the white robe of your electronic body. Like that old spiritual, I've got a robe, you've got a robe, all God's children got a robe. When you get to heaven, you're going to put on that robe and walk all over God's heaven. That is absolutely the case. Wearing this electronic body is the proper attire. That is your entree into the fellowship, the communion of ascended masters. However, you are not obliged to be in exile until the moment of your transition or your ascension. You don't have to just eke out a social existence here until that time. Even now, you not only can, but really and truly ought to be engaged in developing the mastery and the techniques of more and more putting on this robe of your God consciousness. In that consciousness, you will find, in addition to the spiritual senses, that there will be the counterparts to the 5 senses that we are quite familiar with physically. So there will be sight and hearing and taste and touch and smell, as well as the spiritual senses of the heart and so forth. All of those are there within those finer vehicles even now. Many times, the focus of our attention is on certain accomplishment that has to be achieved. Our own path here in the world. It is good and in order that we should draw upon the light, sending forth the light to command the light to do all of those things. That is all very much in order and a part of the path. But I'm sure you also know that you cannot be always in that mode. There are going to be all kinds of other experiences and facets to the divine expression. And it is this spiritual body that is the vehicle that is intended to be used to bring those things forth. When you learn how to rise in attunement into these bodies, one of the things that you will discover is that whereas from a sense of duality, we often consider that when we enter into this realm, we will stand in front of our Holy Christ Self or in front of our electronic body, and as if we were meeting another person. And in fact, that is only the case when our consciousness is here, focused in this world. But as we rise into those vehicles of consciousness, we will find that they are enveloping us on all sides. And we share in the consciousness of our Holy Christ Self, in the experience that the Holy Christ Self is experiencing, looking out through the eyes and the ears of the Holy Christ Self, and operating from within out. That is why the Ascended Masters and Saint Germain in particular hammer away at the issue of identification with the presence. For as long as there is always going to be you and your Christ self, or you and your presence as two distinct entities, you will never be able to rise within that attunement and actually be that very presence. Your Holy Christ self ought to be a marvelous example of this exercise, because by definition, the very nature of the Christ self is to hold conscious attunement with the mighty I Am presence and know that that presence is who and what the Holy Christ self is. As you enter into your Holy Christ self, then there is going to come in from space. Every pore of space is going to exude this sense that I am this presence in action. And as you enter into that sense of the presence, you will have entered into this white stone that the builders rejected. And you will have lowered once again the capstone onto your own individual pyramid of identity, fusing together that duality which has been separate and making it the one whole self that it has been intended to be. I can tell you without fail that one of the reasons that this is so important to the Ascended Masters, that you enter into this heightened awareness of your Christ consciousness, is that as you do so, you will find that the appetites of the flesh fall of their own weight off of your world. They do not go because there is a wrestling match between you and them. They don't go because you are having to beat them to death. They don't go because you're engaged in some great, ponderous sacrifice. They go because you simply don't need those things anymore, because you have discovered joys and refreshments and enjoyments, and even, if you wish, entertainments that are 1,000 times more sublime and magnificent than the human imagination could ever conceive. And this, in and of itself, is such a protection to the disciple, because there is no longer any yen for this outer world experience. You might be scratching your head saying, oh, come on, is it really going to happen that way? Because I don't know. I like hot rods. I like going to the drag races, or whatever it might be. There are some things that I really get a lot of satisfaction out of that I don't think they do in the Ascended Master octaves. True, very true. But if you think that the Ascended Master octaves are for Puritans, for long-faced, solemn, dour-faced beings who go around in ponderous solemnity all the time, you are cheating yourself of the most rapturous joy and beauty and sublime magnificence than you could ever imagine. You have a spiritual palate for refined tastes of your Holy Christ self and your I Am presence, which are 1,000 times more ravishing than the crudities of this outer world, the coarseness, the insensitivity. And I promise you, without exception, that a little bit more willingness to receive the overshadowing of your own Holy Christ self, of an attention to the fact that you can actually straddle worlds, that you can be in this world, but you can also be in the world of your Holy Christ self, where life is going on right now. Life is being lived in those higher octaves by this expansion of your own identity. If you can have faith, I am here and I am there, and know yourself to be that being that is there, and bow before that august personage that is your own individualized God being as this stone of identity, this rock, this bedrock of selfhood that is unmoved by all the world's vicissitudes and even your own karma. If you can invite that and begin to live in that life, it will be such a protection, because you will have all of the reinforcement coming back to you. I really can't find the proper kind of analogies that might compare this to any human experience necessarily. The only thing that comes to mind is a little bit mundane. I hesitate to use it, but I think I will anyway, just because I do want you to understand how you can follow the thread of contact with your Holy Christ self through the flame of your own heart chakra. Because your heart chakra is like the telephone with the television on it. It is the microphone. It's the means of communion and communication between you and your Holy Christ self. I think about some relatives of mine who, in my younger years, they loved to go deep sea fishing. And from time to time, one of the things that they chose to do was go for large ocean-going tuna fish, 200, 300 pounds. And when you have one of those big fish on the line, it may be a matter of 2, 3, or 4 hours reeling in the fish. And so all you have is this line that's going down into the opaque depths of the water. And the only thing you know for sure is that there's a tug at the other end of the line. That's the only feedback you get, that there's something down there, as well as precedent that other people have been reeling in fish. So presumably there are such things as fish down there, and there's this tug on your line. And just that tug is enough to keep you battling in the hopes that you will board the fish yourself at some point. Well, if it is nothing more than the tug of your heart, of your love for your presence, if you can just enter into that inner chamber where there is you and your mighty I Am presence breaking the bread of life together, sharing the joy of loving one another, just having the shuttle of that love going back and forth from one threefold flame in your heart to the threefold flame in the heart of your electronic body, that tug can be the beginning of the encouragement and the feedback that says this presence is there. I feel the tug at the other end of the line. I know that up there in that crystal cord is that glorious electronic body. I feel this strain and tension of the light on that crystal cord, and I know that it is real. As you take that as an article of faith and then move to the next step of realizing that if you can change your thinking to be aware that this is the coordinates of not only this three-dimensional world, but the inner world, that all of this is going on, you can progress in getting more and more direct feedback of the life that you are living right now in your higher bodies. And as that life becomes more and more real to you, the things of this world will become less and less of interest in terms of things that would pull you away from the light. They would be like magnets on the door of a refrigerator that have lost their magnetism, and they just simply fall into the violet flame to be consumed. I would wish that as the opportunity for each and every one of you. In the book of Revelation, as Jesus, through John on the Isle of Patmos, is making his final statements to his disciples and to those of the Christian dispensation, he says, "To him that overcometh will I give a white stone, and a new name written thereupon." This is that same white stone of your God identity, and it is the science of this God presence in all of its beautiful, magnificent, not complexity, but intricacy, the powers of it. All of that is truly both the basis as the foundation stone, and it's also the capstone, the crown of the golden age. It is the means whereby the ascended masters are intent on bringing a golden age into being. You should understand, disciples of the ascended masters, you live in a time of the Manu Yuga. The time of the Manu Yuga is a time the great Manus of the root races, together with the holy Kumaras, through the thought form of the 9-point of the love star and other actions of the sacred fire, that the Manus are sending forth a tremendous pressure of light from their level. And the intent of this is to augment what everyone's individual Holy Christ self has the karmic ability to do because of what the outer expression of that individual has done. The Holy Christ self is not able to transcend the law of octaves due to whatever might have been the limited efforts of the outer expression under normal circumstances. But what these great Manus are doing is they are applying a tremendous pressure of light from the top down through the Holy Christ selves, and they are putting in the hands of the Christ selves a scepter of authority in the form of that cosmic light of the Ascended Master Consciousness that enables the Holy Christ selves to do more than they karmically otherwise would be able to do on an individual basis. So this is clearly one of those cases, as Jesus said, work while ye have the light. And now you have that Ascended Master light to reinforce what your own Holy Christ self would enable you to do. May I close with a bit of instruction on rising into this consciousness of the white stone, the Cubit Stone, as released by beloved Saint Germain. He says, "Let us disabuse the minds of the beloved students of any sense of time or space or distance. The key in consciousness, which will open the entrance into all of the higher spheres above you, lies in the simplicity, but the firmness of your self-control. Those students who would desire to dwell earnestly upon this great truth, that where your consciousness is, there you are, for I am everywhere." Now he steps back and he explains something. He says that we have long dwelt in consciousness that there was great distance in space and that there has been this linear flow of time. And he says that this is all a sense, it is a fabrication of the outer mind. And he says it is only a gossamer veil. And you are able to step through this gossamer veil that separates your outer consciousness from the full power and activity by the actions of your own thoughts and feelings. And then he gives this great comforting statement. Those students who are reaching to the light so very earnestly, desiring to live in and to be children of the light, they are already dwelling constantly in these higher spheres. The beauty of these spheres surpassing the fondest imagination of their outer consciousness. When you enter them consciously and at will, you will find all creation there just as tangible in its form phase as your physical buildings are here today. Therefore, take your firm stand. I am the power of my complete self-control forever sustained. This will make it easier for you to gain this mastery. Students must hold this consciousness that when they recognize the I Am presence is acting, it is impossible for that presence to be interrupted or interfered in any way. Therefore, know that time and space are not real, and the knowing of the vastness of eternity is already within your grasp. For you to enter a higher sphere than your physical world in full consciousness is but an adjustment and a shift of the point of the attention of your consciousness. How do you do this? By knowing you are consciously already there. Affirm often, through the power of the electronic circle which I create, I am no longer touched by doubts and fears. I joyously grasp the scepter which I am, stepping boldly into any of these higher spheres that I wish, retaining perfectly clear conscious memory of my activity there. So rest in that great ipse dixit statement of our beloved Saint Germain, knowing that already there is the drawing close of worlds, the world of your four lower bodies with that of your Holy Christ self and your mighty I Am presence. Obviously, the nuances of applying this white stone are many. The things that you unlearn many times are as important as the things that you learn. And so at this forthcoming class, we will be unlearning many of the habits that the mind has slipped into that are inherited from the human race, as well as learning more and more how to cooperate with and rise into these higher vehicles of consciousness and trigger the release of their limitless power and light to go forth and conclude the work that we are obliged to conclude in order to fulfill our divine plan. So this entire area is the topic of our forthcoming class. I'm sure that you can see how it is indeed a flaming capstone on the great fiery pyramid of life of our dawning golden age. Those who are able to remain and stay on for Acropolis Sophia, we will be delving once again into the lifeblood of the Christ, not merely the divine virtues as they have been portrayed, but how there is a counterpart to those virtues and principles in the great breaths and liquid light currents that flow forth from the body of the Holy Christ self and account for the spiritual senses and the physical senses and the more phenomenal powers of the creation by the Christ self and the God presence. So the anthem of creation, we will revisit the symphony of the 5 secret rays, going more into depth in the treatment of those 5 secret rays and how they correspond to the various very precise pranas of the sacred fire flowing already through the 4 lower bodies.